Welcome to the Jill on Money Show. It is Sunday, January 1st. Happy New Year, one and all. Okay, obviously I'm pre-taping this because, we're not doing this on Sunday. But we are so happy that we are closing the chapter on 2022. I think it was a turbulent year for so many, and the markets were crazy. I guess the thankful part of it is that, hopefully that we've had that horrible year and we can put it behind us and we have a different year ahead. And there's always something different. That's a cool thing about this job that I have. I get to report on different things. And hopefully you are looking forward as well. So in order to move forward, we are encouraging you to look backwards. And that is why this weekend we are re-airing our interview with Dan Pink, because his book is called The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. So let's look back a little bit. Let's look forward. Let's talk a little bit about, this time of year is such a great time to think about forgiving people, asking for forgiveness, and how this plays into the idea of regrets. Here is the second part of our interview with Dan Pink. I was on the board of an organization called StoryCorps, which does, audio stories. Yeah. And the founder, Dave Isay, used to recount this he would say that, basically, when you have these conversations with your loved ones, especially at the end of their lives, there are essentially four things that they actually say. Okay, so it's obvious, I love you, right? Mm-hmm. That's easy. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then the other two, forgive me. And the other one is, I forgive you.
Oh, interesting.
So how do you think forgiveness plays into regrets?
It's a very, very interesting question. And I think it plays in two ways. First of all, you had mentioned, Jill, that you tend to your bigger regrets are hurting other people. And that's the thing that bugs you a little bit more than, say, a regret of, not asking somebody out on a date or not pursuing, a woman who is attractive. There are two kinds of regret in the architecture. One is regrets of action and one of regrets are inaction. With action regrets, I regret what I did. What you have there is you have the opportunity to seek forgiveness. So if you've hurt somebody, again, let me be concrete here. I got a lot of people who have moral regrets about bullying. Okay, They regret a huge number. I was really surprised by that. A huge number of regrets about bullying, and some of them have gone back to the people who they bullied 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and apologized. All right, and so what they're doing there is they are seeking forgiveness, and that is a way, perhaps, to extinguish the regret or maybe even minimize it. So for regrets of action, you can ask for forgiveness, you can seek forgiveness. However, I think that for all regrets, there's another dimension of forgiveness that is even more important, which is, and again, I don't want to, I'm not a woo-woo kind of guy, but I think there's another dimension of it that is even more important, which is, at some level, forgiving ourselves. We are extraordinarily harsh on ourselves. We treat ourselves with so much in such a severe way that we would never treat anybody we actually cared about. And so one of the ways of dealing with our regret is to get past it with a smidgen of forgiveness and self-compassion. But then to go back into this way of dealing with these regrets systematically, that when we forgive ourselves, we begin to open the way to make sense of the regret and to draw a lesson from it. And one of the best ways we make sense of our regrets is by talking about them or writing about them. The disclosure itself is incredibly important. With essentially no publicity, except for a tweet or two, I put up this thing called the World Regret Survey. Say, hey, anybody want to tell a complete stranger their biggest regret? And we got in weeks 15,000 of these things. Because people want to talk about it. So why do people want to talk about it? Because it relieves the burden, okay? And the other thing, though, is that language, spoken language, written language, it's a conversion process. So negative emotions are blobby and abstract. But when we convert them into words, they're less menacing. They're more concrete. And that begins the sense-making process.
I have to tell you that this is one of my pet peeves, and producer Mark will tell you this, that I hate happiness porn. I hate it so much. I hate like you can be this, you could be this. I find it terribly boring. I really do. And really trite. It's just
tell me what your definition of that is, or an example of that.
Like the focus on that we all have to be happy. Like being a human being doesn't mean you're happy all the time. In fact, I would say that being a human being, in addition to regret and having negative emotions, it's like then all of a sudden you feel bad about yourself. It's like watching a movie and thinking that's what love is.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I find it really very boring, frankly. And so I'm not that interested in a 4-hour work week or happiness at all costs. I'm really into like, let's get down and dirty, roll our sleeves up, get those emotions, label them, talk about them, and use them. And there was something about this that really, when you said the 4 different aspects of regret, the one that I also thought was really interesting was connection. I think that there is a regret when you feel like a relationship, you're trying to put context on a relationship that was important at one time and no longer is important. I'm talking more about friendships than romantic relationships. Yeah. And I thought that was an interesting part of the book when you talked about the woman who was like, I kind of don't know what happened. And then how you get back around and whether you go back and try to resuscitate that. Or is that just maybe a signal that was a relationship for a period of time that no longer serves you? Is it a misplaced regret? Are you really taking responsibility for something that just was never rescuable or not?
It depends. And I think that in some ways, we know the answer to that question in our guts. So for instance, if you are nagged by this idea, it's like, oh, I should, there's this friendship that came apart. And I think you're totally right that a lot of these connection regrets are as much about friendship and they're much more about friendship and completely non-romantic relationships than they are about romantic relationships. If you say, oh, you know what, I really want to reach out to my friend so-and-so because I haven't talked to him or her for 8 years. And at one point we were really close. My view is that regret is telling you something, all right? Because there are plenty of people who you lost touch with who you're not having that thought about. So in a way, you're answering that question. And what happens in a lot of these connection regrets, particularly with regard to friendship, is we're wrong. I mean, we're just terrible forecasters. So we think that, oh my gosh, if I reach out, it's going to feel so awkward and the other side is not going to care. And I can't tell you how often both my reporting and also just piles of academic evidence tell us we've gotten both of those wrong. It's much less awkward than we think. We completely overstate our feelings of awkwardness, our predictions of awkwardness. And the second, it's almost always well received on the other end. Mm-hmm. And so to me, if we arrive at a juncture where we're actually truly wondering, should I reach out? We've answered the question.
Do it.
Do it. Absolutely. When in doubt, reach out. Because there are many relationships that we have or have had where we're not thinking that. I had people who I was friends with, and I mean, I'm thinking about it right now. I'm talking to you from San Francisco, and I have a good friend, who I haven't talked to for a few years, and I mean, he lives here in San Francisco, and I'm thinking, God dang it, like it kind of bugs me that I'm not reaching out right now, and I probably should when I get off the phone with you.
Well, I think you should also. How do you think the pandemic has fostered the idea of regret? Do you think that we sort of where our minds were still enough to contemplate some of this?
Yes. I think that the pandemic forced us into more reflection than we typically would have in our lives, just because things slowed down. And because, again, not to be morbid here, but the specter of mortality, which I think is a central part of our consciousness, became even more explicit in this moment. And so we inevitably were looking backward. And when we look backward, we think about our regrets. And so I think it made people more reflective. And I think what people are looking for in this post-pandemic world, I'm with you on your point about happiness in the smiley, sunny sense of the word happiness. Mm-hmm. And I very rarely even use that word myself. I like to talk about, I think of it in terms of just of flourishing. And one can flourish not by being smiley and sunny, but by doing something meaningful and by contributing and by being around people you care about and who care about you. And sometimes that isn't easy. And sometimes that isn't smiley in an Instagram way, but it is meaningful, and that is a good life. And what's interesting about these 4 core regrets which seems superficially like I spent a couple of years every day going in and saying, oh, let's read some more regrets, in the morning. And you would think that would be a downer, but it was almost the opposite for the reasons you're saying, which is that when people tell you what they regret the most, they're also telling you what they value the most. And the fact that these 4 core regrets keep coming up are people are telling me what they value. They value some stability. Those are foundational regrets. They value growth and psychological richness. They value doing the right thing, and they value love.
Well, that's it. That's the program. Thank you so much for listening. We do wish you a very happy new year, and we are looking forward to an exciting new year. And you know how exciting it is? We have changed our mantra for 2023. Yeah. Grit, Growth, Grace is last year. This year, we've got a new mantra. So we're going to continue to ask you to do something nice for someone else today. And now, going forward, for at least 2023, we are going to ask you to change your work, change your wealth, change your life. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.